morning, Mr. Chairman.
This hearing is called to order. This is a joint public hearing of City Council's committees on public safety and Parks and Recreation and Cultural Affairs. The purpose of this public hearing is to hear testimony on resolution number 160904. I'm recognizing the attendance of Councilman Greenlee and Councilman Tullenberger. Will the clerk please read the title of the resolution being heard today?
Resolution number 160904, a resolution authorizing the Committee on Public Safety and Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs to hold joint hearings examining the lack of cell phone connectivity throughout Fairmount Park, which poses a safety risk to park visitors in the event of serious health emergencies or violent crime.
So, on occasion, every now and then, we can identify an issue, create stakeholders, put them in a room, and then actually come up with solutions. On those rare occasions, it is good to be a council person, when you can actually figure out a problem and figure out sensible solutions to it. And I think this is one of those occasions. We had an opportunity to travel a lot of our parkland. We were not looking for this issue. We were looking at the beauty of our park system, one that is arguably one of the better park systems on the East Coast. Fortunately, a lot of those acres are in the 4th Councilmatic District, and we enjoy. I had to quickly learn how to be a green councilman, and I realized there are different shades of green. And then the issue came up of use of a cell phone. I can only remember at times, Councilman Greenlee, when I'm coming to work and I'm traveling at a sensible pace, you're right, a sensible pace coming to work, only to remember that I forgot my cell phone. That feeling of dread, that feeling of disconnected, that the whole world is happening without me, is a terrifying feeling. But even worse, I can only imagine whether you are enjoying the park as a hiker, enjoying the park as a jogger, being a biker or a equestrian in the park and something happens. And you fall off a horse or sprain an ankle, or worse, see someone following you that is suspicious. And your instinct might be to grab that phone and call someone, call 911, call for help, call because you lost your keys at the parking lot and need AAA and cannot reach anyone. I can only imagine the dread that I feel when I don't have my cell phone connected to me, but in a case and situation like that, it might be horrifying. So when this issue came up, what, to my surprise, colleagues, was that a lot of the folk in the industry were well prepared to step up and look forward to kind of making sure that dead zones don't happen within our parks, so that always, to the degree that we can always reach out to 911 or to our loved ones for assistance. So with that, we're going to talk about some of the problems that my custodians of the park have experienced, and then we're going to hear from the City of Philadelphia, and then the private sector, which is a real nice stakeholders combination to come up with practical solutions. So, Ms. Williams, can you read the first group and panel? Oh, wait a minute. Do my colleagues have something to say? Because both of them represent the entire park system. I represent 66%. They represent 100%. Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and your leadership in having this hearing. I think it's important from my perspective. I'm looking forward to what the city administration has to say, users of the park, and anyone else that wants to chime in. And I will say, just on a personal basis, I use the park a lot. I live near the park in Fox Chase at Pennypack Park. I fish in the park. And lately, when I go fishing, I do take my cell phone. I will have to say, at that location, right off of Tabor Road in Fairmount Park, Pennypack Park, the cell phone works pretty good. But I will also tell you, at one time it did not. And I actually, years ago, ran into a little trouble. There were kids shooting BB guns. And I said, as a responsible adult, I said, hey, knock that off. You're not supposed to be shooting BB guns. And then they decided to try to shoot at me. And thank God they were bad shots, because I wasn't running either. I thought, you know what, they're going to hit me with a BB gun. I know a little bit about the outdoors. They're not going to kill me. You're going to hurt me, but I'm not running. The cell phone did not work. I did eventually call 911, because these kind of things should be reported, because if kids are shooting at people with BBs, it's not good. Didn't work. Called from my house. The response was way late, nothing ever came of it, but the fact is that having connectivity in today's world is essential, and more particularly, Mr. Chairman, for safety. I look forward to the hearings. Thank you.
Well, I'm so glad you survived that attack in the park. But I could imagine it could have been worse. I can imagine that dread you feel now that we are so connected and so dependent upon our technology. And speaking of technology, I see Councilman O has joined us. So, anybody else with comments about this? If not, can Ms. Williams, can you read the first panel?
The first panel is Mara McCarthy, Bruce Wagner, Chris Safa, and Kevin Ikov.
Welcome. And I want to say in advance, thank you for educating me on some of these challenges that we are trying to tackle today. And more importantly, thank you for the tour and your stewardship of parks in Philadelphia. And I don't want to use the word parks and fierce, but fierce stewardship is something that comes to mind, that protectors of our outdoor experience and environment, and we are grateful for it. So, with that, please state your name for the record and begin your testimony. See, the park people are just so collegial.
Thank you, Councilman, for this opportunity and for bringing us together with the industry representatives. This is a wonderful opportunity for us, and we're sincerely thankful. My name is Mara McCarthy. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of the Wissahickon, and I'm speaking today to express our support of an ecologically friendly solution to the lack of cell phone connectivity in all of Philadelphia's park and recreation lands. For 93 years, FOW has been the steward of Wissahickon Valley Park, a beautiful forested gorge that is part of Fairmount Park in the northwest section of the city. Our 2,000 members and 900 volunteers maintain and preserve trails and historic structures, care for native plant and animal species, and protect the watershed. Each year, our creek contributes the drinking water of 350,000 Philadelphians. Our trees sequester an estimated 2,700 tons of CO2, and our park welcomes 1.1 million recreation visits. The Wissahickon Valley serves as a social and economic anchor for some of Philadelphia's most stable and beautiful neighborhoods: Roxborough, Manayunk, East Falls, Germantown, Mount Airy, and Chestnut Hill. Over the last several months, FOW has collected dozens of statements from park users about the lack of cell phone connectivity on our trails and how it impacts their experience, health, safety, and access to our park system. I've included a copy of those statements from the public along with my own remarks submitted to Council. While there will always be those who love being disconnected during their walks in the woods, too many citizens now avoid the park or consider it unsafe because of our lack of consistent connectivity. For park users with chronic and acute medical conditions, small children, older or mobility impaired visitors, lack of connectivity can mean a park that is simply unusable. This lack of connectivity also affects our policing and enforcement in the Wissahickon and reduces police presence because officers are unable to request backup in a timely fashion while inside many parts of the park. Friends of the Wissahickon is proud to partner with both Parks and Recreation Park Ranger Program and the Philadelphia Police Department, and we strongly encourage Council to give these important departments and our citizens the connectivity that they need in our park system. We hope that the Council will work with city departments and our city's contractors to explore non-cell tower alternatives, which can be installed throughout our natural lands and watershed parks with minimum damage to our rare and beautiful urban forest habitat and waterways. Thank you so much again for your attention to this matter.
And thank you for being able to take us in Philadelphia's borders to a place that makes us appreciate, first of all, our parks, but you could close your eyes and be in Vermont or some other green portion of the world, and that outdoor experience is probably what our park founders really wanted the average citizen to be able to enjoy in the creation of the park system. So we're thankful.
Thank you.
Pull the mic to you. Thank you for coming. Good morning.
Good morning.
You got to pull it to you and state your name.
Yes, good morning, Councilman. My name's Kevin Ikov. I'm one of the trail ambassadors with the Friends of the Wissahickon, and I wanted to read about it's about 7 comments that people made in regards to this whole phone issue or cell issue and non-receptivity, as well as my own experience in the park.
Please proceed.
I was sitting at one of the outreach tables in which we basically provide information about Friends of the Wissahickon to park users and help them in any way we can while we're there answering questions or whatever. On this particular day, and we were right in front of the Valley Green Inn, or right next to the Valley Green Inn, a dog was found off the leash, no owner, and we ended up taking the dog and trying to secure some type of agency or SPCA or someone to come down, or the park rangers to come down to get this dog. We tried numerous times to use our cell phone at that spot and were unable to. Eventually, one of the trail ambassadors that was at this table went off and walked in different directions trying to find where he actually gained connectivity, which was actually over the bridge by Valley Green Inn, and he was able to contact somebody. That's just, it wasn't really a serious emergency problem, but it could have been, and this is right at the Valley Green Inn, which there's lots of traffic there, lots of people are there, there's weddings and all kinds of things that go on there, and it's kind of unsafe not to have some level of connectivity there. These other comments are from people that just wrote in. The first one is from Cher Kiefer. She said, "I'm a juvenile diabetic. I was on the trail one day and my blood sugar started to crash. I took out my cell phone and found no coverage at all. I was alone, no one was around. I pulled out my snacks that I carry and I took them. I started to head back to my car. I had no help and no way to call for help. I thought there were call boxes but didn't see any. I no longer walk in the park, which I miss so much."
Wow.
This next comment is from Stephanie Witzman. "My mom broke her ankle by the red covered bridge and had to wait for someone to find help and get a ranger. Her foot was in really bad shape. She tripped on the ice. The coverage is so very bad on the west side of the bridge and by the path of Chestnut Hill Avenue. Thank you so very much. This is a great help for everyone, especially women, to have this type of coverage brought into the park." This next comment by Kelly Ann. "My car was broken into, but I couldn't find anyone to call from the parking lot to gain help or solve this issue." This next comment comes from Lisa Jamil. "I had to help a biker who had hurt himself coming down from the trail down by the covered bridge and could not call for aid. It's a little dangerous in this area, and there was no cell coverage of any kind when I tried to call, and we had to have people go down by foot and actually, because he broke his bike as well, and so they had to go down and try to secure someone to come down and pick up the bike and also help this man out of the park. And I believe that was it. Thank you so very much, Councilman,
Thank you
for
for
hearing me.
sharing that. You just gave me a recollection. In another life, I was a high school girls track and cross-country coach. My daughter was also on the team. So we would let them off at the top of Valley Green and pick them up at the Main Street exit. So we always made sure one of the children had a cell phone, just in case someone's hurt themselves, strained an ankle or something like that, and we could then, the adults, go up in and try to look for them. It never dawned on me that there are spots in the park until now that we wouldn't have been able to, fortunately, they were pretty fast. They would have ran down and told us, but, it could have been a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council President
Thank you.
Clark and members of the City Council for this opportunity to appear before you this morning. My name is Bruce Wagner, and I am pleased to present comments as a trained trail ambassador volunteer for Friends of the Wissahickon. As an ambassador, I've spent over 6,000 hours hiking and guiding in the Wissahickon Valley Park over the past 8 years. As trail ambassadors, our duties are to serve as outdoor docents and friendly, knowledgeable guides, helping visitors in the park for the FOW, on trails, on pathways, and sites of the many icons throughout the park. There are sections of the 1,800 miles of public trails where cell phones don't work. That's 1,800 acres, pardon me. It would be nice if we had 1,800 miles, but we don't. The steep 700-foot Wissahickon Gorge, unusual geologic formations, and the delightfully wild forest of the valley may be causing these blackout areas. I have led visitor groups and encountered individuals who have become disoriented or injured on the trails, and they're not able to help themselves, nor have I been able to call for emergency responders. Happily, I have not encountered life-threatening situations, but we have cyclists sometimes racing down steep, rocky trails, elderly park visitors discovering that the trails or rocks or weather conditions are presenting more challenge than they expected. Young children are on the trails. They're a delight to see, but there are also big rocks or narrow trails in the park, and they present the potential for falls. Beyond that, we live in an age when flip-flops are often thought to be just fine for walking over sharp terrain. I've fixed that a few times. Beyond that, we live in an age when I have provided Band-Aids for souvenirs to visitors who just might have learned that a different choice in foot gear might be better for next time. With all these invitations to significant injury, the absence of effective cell service could lead to injuries complicated by the extended time required for first responders to reach the victims. Frequently, there is at least a half mile between the potential injury site and an open area to call 911 and wait for help. That's at least 10 minutes walk before calling for help, then waiting, and then returning to the site at least an additional 10 minutes. That's a long time for bleeding. It's a long time for aching. In addition, dead cell areas make it impossible for trail ambassadors to register our tours with city park rangers. They're supposed to know where we are. There are public safety risks here, which we're grateful that you're addressing. Many times over these past 8 years, I've had problems with cell connectivity in the park. Valley Green Inn is a popular historic inn located in the center of the valley, and there's a cell blackout inside the inn. Workers there know that they're not going to be able to receive calls while they're working, and they've got to go out somewhere in the parking lot or over the bridge if they're going to be able to reach anybody. And then they're outside of the inn, there's almost mystical uncertainty in that park area. A parking lot, a frequent visitor meeting place, one of the most likely places for unfamiliar park visitors to become confused or frustrated. It's a difficult time for mystery. Do we know if there are visually discrete and environmentally sound processes to provide coverage? Naturally, it would be our earnest wish that before any broadcasting or delay towers were constructed. Can you imagine how those towers would reflect the wildness of the valley? At any rate, before that, it would be good for there to be a thorough vetting process involving best practices. This would include monitoring EMF exposure as well as aesthetic considerations, maintenance, proper lighting to prevent unnecessary bird migration, death, and remediation of the footprint under any possible tower with native species, stormwater runoff, and trail enhancement. I thank you for engaging in this thoughtful process for the public good. I'm happy to take any questions.
Also, we've been joined by my colleague, Councilman Squiller, who represents his share of the park as well. Are there any questions for this panel? Oh, one more. Oh, my constituent. My apologies.
Apology accepted. Good morning. My name is Chris Safa, and I want to thank you, Councilman Jones, for your ongoing leadership, not only in safety, but for the environment. And we're very grateful to you for holding this hearing. And I want to thank the Public Safety Committee and also the Parks and Rec Committee. So my comments, first I wanted to read testimony from the director of the Wissahickon Environmental Center, also known as the Treehouse. My name is Trish Fries, and I'm the Environmental Education Program Specialist at Philadelphia Parks and Recreation's Wissahickon Environmental Center. We serve over 5,000 children and 2,000 adults annually with our programming offered at the center. In addition, we have countless others using our trails in this area on their own. While we generally have cell phone reception at the building itself, we have spotty coverage in areas away from the building, and specifically at the Forbidden Drive entrance at Northwestern Avenue, which I want to note is a quarter-mile steep gravel road, which some of you are familiar with. And this is the entrance where we would meet emergency personnel if there was a medical emergency. And we need to be able to communicate to emergency vehicles where to proceed to find our building or to find an injured visitor. Being in the park and at the border between two municipalities, Philadelphia, right, and White Marsh, and two Philadelphia police districts, it is challenging to get our location known to emergency response personnel. Relaying information from that entrance is imperative, and cell phone coverage needs to be reliable. This is also where we often meet school groups. We ask the teachers to contact us on our cell phones when they are delayed. In addition to programming in our immediate area of the center, we also take our summer camp programs, hiking or biking along Forbidden Drive, and need to communicate with each other for meeting locations, times, flat tires, and medical issues. As others will testify, coverage in the valley is very poor, and messages are often delayed. On a related topic, the police do not have radio coverage in our area. For their own safety, they do not patrol this area without being able to communicate for backup. Thank you for considering this very important safety issue. Sincerely, Trish Fries. So I met yesterday with the 5th District Police Advisory Council, and I learned and also spoke to the Marine Division, and I'm a member of the PDAC there in the 5th District. And the police tell me that, and the park patrols say that they actually use their cell phones because their radios don't work. So when they respond to try to find victims, the people in trouble use the cell phone, someone stays with the victim and goes out and brings the police in. So it's very complicated, as you said, and dangerous for everyone. And Devil's Pool has no coverage, and as you may know, that is a very, very dangerous area with a lot of injuries and accidents. So, of course, the cell companies would do a thorough mapping probably about where exactly there's blackouts for each of the companies. But, the police were saying that below Valley Green Inn, there's some coverage. Above it, from the Valley Green into the covered bridge, there's spotty coverage. Above the covered bridge to the northern boundary of the park, there's almost no coverage. And then at Wissahickon Environmental Center, in all those trails, there's no coverage. So there's 3 police districts. Do you have a copy, I think you do, of the 3 police districts with maps in your notes that Sam handed you, if you just want to look at that for a second? So it is complicated because of the, what do we have? The 5th, the 39th, and the 14th district all serve the park, and you can see there. And plus there's two, yeah, that's the map. Thank you. Plus 2 city municipalities. So in the olden days, we had 24 dedicated park rangers, 20 of them on horseback, 4 on foot, and they worked in 2 shifts. Those days are gone, and now everyone relies on their cell phones, right? We have a completely different situation, different challenges. But with improved cell connectivity, there'll be better outcome for the public and the police. And what did I want to say about the map? If you take a look at the map on the back of, there you go. If you haven't been to Valley Green, is there anyone who hasn't been in that park? Councilman O, you've been out there, right? Yeah, so you're very familiar. But it just illustrates very dramatically that it's like the Grand Canyon of Philadelphia. It's a deep, deep gorge that was cut through rocks, and that's why it's beautiful, and that's why we want to protect it. It's really a miniature alpine gorge.
Yes.
And we're proud of the work the city does with Parks and Recreation and the Water Department and Streets Department, along with the army of volunteers from groups like the Friends of the Wissahickon and others who love their park. And we all work together to make the city better. And we've heard a lot of clever ideas recently, like hanging signal relay equipment, which apparently isn't really a real technical term, on the bottom of the Walnut Lane Bridge or the Henry Avenue Bridge, or burying a conduit along Forbidden Drive all the way to put in maybe solar power, putting it on the streetlights. We're going to leave this up to the experts to come up with a good idea. And then people are mentioning, where are the call boxes? Why don't we bring back the call boxes like they have in the universities, except the vandals would love to dismantle them, but that might work too. But we're very open to whatever might work, but I guess respectfully, we want to request that the outcome of this hearing would lead to some environmentally sensitive non-tower alternatives for this park, especially since, as you may be aware, this park was one of the first places in the United States to be designated for its scenic beauty as a natural national landmark. And taking the time and care to research and design a smart solution will help make it better for all of us. And thank you, and we look forward to being part of this cell connectivity conversation. And I just want to formally invite everyone in the room to come out at any time for a tour. We have a lot of people here who are very well trained in every aspect of the park and all of its mysteries, so we'd be welcome to have you. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for teaching me about the bobolinks.
The bobolinks have returned.
They have returned. So only in my district, there are 300 or so species of birds that fly over us every day. From the 21st Ward Reservoir to the 33rd Street Reservoir, all the way down to Hines Preserve. These birds fly over and nest with us all the time. And one of them, the bobolink, only in my district that I know.
This is our environmental councilman right here.
Right. So they have groups up there that do things like toad protection. So there's a time of the year where the toads come across the road, and my neighbors and constituents stand out there and make sure
the toad detour. Look it up. We're good. And we appreciate all of the help that you've given us. To mention the bobolink migrates at night by the stars, and they've just arrived from South America. And they need a grassland habitat that you provided with environmental protection that was landmark, and we're grateful to you for that.
Well, I learned from you guys. So in those areas, particularly what is a challenge for us to solve, is I've experienced people, and one time on Main Street, where we dialed 911 and it went to the
Montgomery
township.
County, yeah.
And they said, how may we help you?
Same thing.
The same thing? And we discovered we were in the wrong town. And they quickly referred us and switched us over. But those connective, and being able to, I guess, triangulate where you are to where you are trying to get to is essential. You know, in our case, we were just talking about somebody who was dumping trash, but it was a trash dumper
Delaware County.
in Delaware County. White Marsh or other places. This is critical if you're trying to prevent a violent crime. Those transfers, those minutes matter. And so we want to try to figure this out. Does anybody have any other questions?
Yes.
No? Yes?
Yes.
Councilman?
Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I did not know that you were such an avid bird watcher, so I will love to take the opportunity sometime to watch with you. And Ms. Safra, I wasn't going to lead off with the first question, but I always like to learn about nature myself, as I have a degree in agriculture. I also was co-sponsor along with
Thank you.
Councilman Jones on this bill.
Thank
And
you.
I mentioned earlier, I used Pennypack Creek
Good.
a lot because it's very close to my home.
We have rainbow trout waiting for you in the Wissahickon.
I'm going to
12-inch and brown trout,
That's pretty impressive.
actually, yeah.
I actually caught 2 rainbows on opening day, but I look forward to fishing on the Wissahickon. And actually, I have years ago. And it was kind of interesting, and I raised this point just in conversation. I went fishing there, and it has to be 20 years ago. Cell phones were new. And the guy across from me was fishing. I was doing quite well. He was doing pretty well. But he was also taking calls from his office. And I eventually told him across the creek, I said, do you ever cut this off? I mean, why don't you go away or leave that phone? My point is that obviously connectivity at that point was there. I don't know if he was reporting in to his wife that he had enough fish for dinner or not, but he might have been. But what I wanted to mention to you is there a sense with in the Wissahickon, because you've done some conversation on this, that sort of mapped where cell phone is working and where it is
We
not?
have information about that, but we didn't split it up with the different providers. So they would have to do their own mapping.
Okay.
I mean, the police have their information, but it's all anecdotal. So I think it's like, can you hear me now? You need
Yeah.
equipment, am I right?
You know, I
I
think
don't want to speak for the people that provide the service. I don't know how to do it, I forgot to go to engineering school.
my
So-
experience is that in the same place, at one day I'll have 1 bar, another day I'll have 3.
Okay.
Maybe later the first day I might get a second. Maybe later the other day I might lose the 3 that I had.
Okay.
I mean, it's amazingly inconsistent, which again means if you want to rely on it,
Oh.
it's not a reliable
In
instrument.
today's, in fact, Mr. Wagner, you raise a very good point in my own collective memory. Years ago, before cell phones were as freely available as they were now, a very dear friend of mine who was a veteran of World War II in the European theater was walking along for his daily walk. He was hit by a bicyclist who did not have the common decent courtesy of stopping. He just kept going. Later, he was apprehended, but that's another story. But my point is, he's laying there. He knows he has broken at least a leg or an ankle or something. He cannot move, and he's laying there thinking, I've survived the battles of Europe, and I'm going to die here within feet of my home. And, it's very sad that he didn't have the option of a cell phone. But the fact is, if he did today and it didn't work, it could be critical, and many times in situations like that, seconds really do matter. So I am very supportive of this. I look forward to talking to the industry to see what can be done to remedy this, because we need to have confidence in this. When you walk in the woods and enjoy the day, you need to know that, even though you're all alone, you're safe. You can call someone. Ms. Safra, back to your testimony, I made a note that you had said at some places the police radio doesn't work, so they use cell phones.
Yeah,
The police.
this is what we're told.
And if the cell phones don't work, then you're really alone.
That's what we're saying.
I mean, then you gotta release.
It's anecdotal. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but this is what we're told.
Okay.
And,
This is not
No one will get
it's
anybody.
mystical
trouble.
how it works. It's magic. My
Vice versa.
husband is in that industry, and it's all magic. It's all done with math and who knows what. But you're right.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that.
And yet, we do not actually support having this magnificent canyon lined with towers. So
Understood.
there's, you know,
I-
nor drones. I don't know. Maybe there's a way to figure it out.
I think
though.
in today's technology, there must be a way.
That's what we're hoping.
And I'd love to work with you on that. I will take you up on the tour. I
Good.
would like to, and if you have a moment where you can show me a bobolink, I don't want to have Councilman
may.
Jones be the only person here, the only council member that has ever seen a bobolink.
It's quite a rare feat, and he's a good birder.
Oh, it is a rare, okay.
It's a rare, very rare bird, but we have them in Manitoba.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Thanks to Councilman
Where
Jones.
the
Why-
deer and the antelope also play.
That's right. Actually, we
really
have
in your
coyote
artistic,
now.
mode
Yeah.
today.
We have bear, as you know.
Bears.
What? Bear?
Black bear in the park, right?
You have a bear in the park?
We have had bears, actually a singular bear, it's unusual. Coyote.
Well,
there's some-
coyotes are now everywhere. In fact,
Yes,
there's
and-
a really good picture of a coyote running around in downtown Manhattan between the taxis.
Absolutely.
So, but,
Foxes, bald eagles.
Okay.
We have some amazing wildlife in the park, and we just want more people to be able to enjoy it and really see it. This is an amazing birthright for Philadelphians. We want to make sure they all get a chance to see it.
well, I look forward to seeing all the animals you mentioned with the exception of a bear. I'm really not in the mood to see a bear, and that might be a problem if you got too many
He's a lot
bears.
more afraid of you than you are of him,
Okay.
I think.
And I also wanted to thank you very, very much for all your fine work, Ms. McCarthy, because I heard from Mr. Wetzel. I had
Yes.
a meeting with him, and I'm excited to meet up with you and possibly,
I hope we'll see you at our annual meeting in June, is my hope.
when is that? So I can put that on my
June
schedule.
6th. June 6th.
June 6th. Okay.
Yes.
I will make every effort to be there. I'll get back to you or Mr. Wetzel
Thank you.
on my availability. Thank you. And Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman O?
Thank you very much. Well, I'd just like to say that I happen to have discovered that Councilman Jones is not just a track coach, but really a track coach who has coached some young people to championships, national championships, state championships. He's actually a very significant person. He always goes to Penn Relays, so he's quite accomplished coach. Yeah.
We're going to stay on subject now.
May I just respond to that, please?
Yes.
I'm happy to know that you're a track coach. And on the same topic, one of the tragic things that happened in the park was one of my daughter's friends was attacked by the man who they thought was the Fairmount Park rapist a couple years ago. It turns out this young lady was a state-ranked track star. So not only was she, luckily, was able to fight the guy off, but then she took off and he couldn't catch her. She ran down to the main part of the park where there was a fisherman, and no one could really help her. The guy ran away, though, because there was no cell coverage. So being a track star comes in handy.
Those are the situations we dread. It's one thing to break an ankle and, suffer a little bit, but it can get worse, and we want to make it better, and that's why we're here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say that is in line with kind of my questions or comments. So I do very much appreciate the hearing. Unfortunately, many times criminals target, particularly abducting children or women. They do it along the edge of a park. And even though there may be people or cars somewhere over there, they just drag them into, the park area. And I live in Southwest Philadelphia, across from Cobb's Creek Park. It's probably when I call 911, I
beautiful
get
park.
Delaware County. Yeah, unfortunately, at Whitby Avenue, the facilities are not well maintained. There used to be a tennis court that's pretty much gone, basketball court, other things, but there have been murders in the park. And unfortunately, with the crack epidemic came neighborhood prostitution and other types of things. I think it is very important that we have connectivity for those purposes, for life-saving and other types of law enforcement purposes. I do have a question, however. Once we're kind of deep into the woods, and this has come up before, I kind of explore this topic, and I will be having a demonstration at some point in time, and that is about drones. So I do support the connectivity. I just wonder, you know, with today's technology, just this massive area and the capability of drones to see in the dark, to have thermal, to basically provide. Unfortunately, we just don't. You've raised a wonderful thing. I wish we could just say we have more mounted and police and rangers. We're all very tight on money. It just seems like the technology would be able to provide for a lot of coverage and even some preventative, influence if criminals particularly know that there is something overhead patrolling. We do run into some issues about that. I think that's what we need to explore. But do you have some ideas on how to get the connectivity in an environmentally friendly way? And what do you think about like the drone patrol or things like that?
I wanted to answer your question about the drones. When I said I don't approve of drones, that's my opinion, and I only meant in terms of every kid can buy a drone for $100, and people have been starting to fly the drones in our beautiful, pristine wilderness park.
I agree with you, yes.
And you know, my
I agree,
sister's
it has to be
husband
regulated.
has cancer. They went out in
Sure.
the park. The drone came, and a guy
Right.
was down in the parking lot observing them, taking a movie of them.
Right.
This is wrong. So that's a whole different conversation, and hopefully maybe another
Yeah,
hearing.
my
I don't mean for law
conversation's about
enforcement or
law
or surveillance.
enforcement,
No, I support
medical, that type of thing.
Absolutely, that's technology that I'm sure we're going to all use. And the 5th District used that recently on River Road in a sad incident where they protected their officers by sending the drone in through the window to see that the suspect had killed himself. But instead of sending the officer in, they used a drone. So it's a perfect example how drones are great, and we thank the engineers that invented them, right? But I mean for personal recreational drone use, well, the major cities in the country don't permit them in the public places. New York, San Diego, I mean,
And
you
do you
can't.
have any ideas, or have you seen anything about how to create this connectivity or cell phone, the wireless that is eco-friendly?
I haven't, but maybe Mark.
I have done a little bit of research with other Parks Alliance groups across the country. They've used a number of different strategies, but I think in this case, rather than us making suggestions, we're really excited to hear from the industry representatives here what they think the best solutions are. The problem when comparing our park to other parks is its topography is really unique because it's a gorge. So something that works beautifully even in Pennypack may not be a good solution for the Wissahickon. And I think that that's one of the things the industry representatives are keenly aware of, is that every site is unique and needs a unique answer. So we're just very excited and receptive to hear what solutions they can suggest to us and work together with all of you and with them to find out the right fit for each unique park location.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Are there any other questions for this panel? Seeing none, we'd like you to stay so that we can hear from the industry experts and maybe interact. Who is the next group, Ms. Williams?
Panel number 2 will be Aparna Palantino and Captain Francis Healy.
Thank you. We appreciate you guys. Usually we let the city of Philadelphia make a statement first, but I wanted you to hear from the stakeholders in the park area to kind of crystallize what their concerns and objectives for this hearing are. And thank you once again. Either of you may begin your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. State your name for the record.
Aparna Palantino. Good morning, Chairman Jones and committee members. My name is Aparna Palantino, and I am the Deputy Commissioner of Capital Infrastructure and Natural Lands Management with Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. I appear before you today on behalf of the department concerning Resolution Number 160904, introduced by Councilman Jones, which examines the lack of cell phone connectivity throughout Fairmount Park. Public safety and quality of life issues have always been a top priority for Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. As such, we have installed security cameras and sonic devices at more than 100 sites throughout the city. We've also installed locator signs and mile markers along trails and worked to ensure that this information is readily available to both the Philadelphia Police Department and Emergency Management Services. The mission of PPR is to advance the prosperity of the city and the progress of Philadelphians through intentional and sustained stewardship of public land and waterways, as well as through safe, stimulating recreation, environmental, and cultural centers. Our facilities and park infrastructure is changing more rapidly than at any previous time in history. We are happy to explore ways to improve cell connectivity throughout our system, while also ensuring that any improvement will not destroy natural lands and ecosystems. We are grateful to Councilman Jones for introducing this resolution and for calling attention to the potential safety risks to park users. PPR will continue working with the Philadelphia Police Department, members of council, constituents, and stakeholders to address these issues of cellular connectivity and public safety in parks. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
And for the record, thank you for your receptiveness to a changing condition that probably our founding park fathers could have never conceived of. But as we evolve, as technology evolves, and we have to respond to those needs, and you are open to it, and we are thankful for it.
Certainly.
Good morning, Councilman Jones.
Good morning.
And other members of the Committees on Public Safety, Parks and Recreation, Cultural Affairs. My name is Captain Francis Healy, and I'm the Special Advisor to Commissioner Ross. On behalf of the Commissioner, thank you for allowing the Police Department to testify on the issue of cell phone access throughout the Philadelphia Park system. As we all know, the Philadelphia Police Department is tasked with responding to all crimes and calls for service throughout the city, which includes the vast park system within the city. While I am personally aware the Pennypack Park has implemented a mile marker system for visitors to better identify their actual location in the park, the Police Department does recognize that cell phone connectivity and marker systems are critical to effectively responding to criminal activity, but equally important when responding to medical emergencies. Having personally worked in a police district that encompasses a large portion of the park, I can confirm the frustration and angst of responding officers when the call to police is either delayed or we simply cannot find the exact location of the victim. To express the context and importance of this issue, I was asked to provide some data. So I reached out to our mapping and analysis unit to compile some statistics to include the crime classifications for the last 3 years from January to approximately this date. Now, these numbers include not just the park system, but the recreation systems. So don't get confused. This is not all in the Pennypack and Fairmount Park. It's much broader.
Okay.
I chose this time period so we could actually be comparable. Let me see where we're at here. I'm sorry. So January 1 through May 9th for 2015, 16th, and 17th. The police department, let me see, I lost my part. In 2015, there were 1,755 reported incidents in and around the parks and recreation systems. In 2016, there were 1,804 incidents. And this year, 2017, for the same time period, there has been 1,667 reported incidents. While this represents a 7.5% reduction from 2016, I believe these statistics demonstrate the obvious need and importance of cell phone connectivity and marker systems within the park systems. That being said, the Philadelphia Police Department appreciates the recognition and future efforts of City Council to address this issue and to identify possible solutions that would enhance the safety for all park visitors. This concludes my testimony, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And I appreciate you guys coming forward. Sometimes when we look at a problem, I want you to know, we don't do it from a gotcha moment. It is let's get it and let's get it fixed opportunity. And you've always been that way, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
To your knowledge, recognizing also the presence of Councilman Green, who also represents all of the park. And use it. Okay. All right. So in those instances, Did we, in the parks, if you can codify and segregate that, have we had instances where people cited that they could not call 911?
I have anecdotal, I don't have statistical data, but yes.
I'll take anecdotal.
Yes, I've heard anecdotally that people have difficult time in the park, especially Fairmount Park. I believe the dynamics of Pennypack Park make it a little better in the fact that it's much narrower, so there's access to towers on either side. I'm from Northeast Philadelphia, and I'm actually in Pennypack Park almost every Saturday. So I understand the problem, and I've seen it evolve in very positively. The mile marker system in Pennypack Park was incredibly important. I worked in the 8th District for quite a few years, and it was very problematic when we would get a call for service. Trying to locate somebody in the park was incredibly difficult. They would say they went in off of one road and they actually walked a mile, and the accessibility of finding out where they were was very difficult. So I'm very thankful for the mile marker system that has been installed, and it is helpful for the police officer. Our job is to get there as quickly and safely as possible, but sometimes you walk down the park, you don't know whether to turn right or left. So having that type of information is a big enhancement in the park, and I'm very much appreciative from the police department's perspective that it's there.
It's kind of easy to get turned around when all trees start to look alike to you. And for our super park participants, that's not the case. They know the moss grows on the north side of the tree and all that Daniel Boone stuff. But for folk like me, without this cell phone, if to GPS my way out of it, it might become difficult. Let me ask the hard question of how many of those are assaults and violent crimes?
I can get you that data if you want. I didn't break it down. I just got the basic numbers, because that's what I thought you were wanting for. But I can break it down, and I can actually narrow it down to actually what's in the park per se, as opposed to the rec centers. So you have a better picture, and I can get you that data.
If you could provide that to me, I'll share that with members of the committee. So that is not our emphasis today. Our emphasis is how to make sure going forward that we are a safer park system. Are you aware of the problem when people call 911 receiving Delaware and White Marsh and other places like that?
That happens on all borders. It depends on where you bounce your cell phone tower off of. So even if you're in Philadelphia, if the closest tower may be the Delaware County tower, that's where your call would go to. And then all our 911 systems they speak to each other, quite frankly, and they bounce the calls rather quickly.
So they transfer it quickly.
Correct.
And I'm glad about that, but is there, I guess, in our next panel, a question of how we can narrow that down so that that shaves that response time off of that? So right. I don't need you to answer it, but I'm hoping that we will get some answers. Any other questions by members of the panel?
Yes.
Councilman?
Captain, are you aware of any places in the park citywide where traditional police radio doesn't work?
I'll be very honest with you, personally, no. Okay, but I'm not saying that we haven't had issues or spotty issues. I actually have an email into my radio commander right now asking if he's aware of any permanent and continual problems. As soon as I get you an answer on that, I'll be happy to report back.
I mean, because thank you. What was described by Ms. Soffer earlier in testimony was that sometimes police use cell phones.
Correct.
And if cell phones aren't working and police radio doesn't work,
right.
It's
our primary
could be a real
concern.
problem.
No, our radio access for our officers is officer safety is paramount concern. So I will look into it. I know sometimes there is spotty issues due to the terrain. I knew it can be an issue. I'm not going to say it's not, but
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a pervasive issue that if it were, I'm sure it would have reached the commissioner's level.
I mean, there would be a protocol, I guess, in place that in the regular part of the city, if police radio did not work for whatever reason,
Correct.
you'd be on it pretty quickly to...
When the radio goes down, I do believe they automatically put officers, double team them in cars. It's two officers to a car rather than one.
Well, yeah, but I mean also to resolve the problem with
Oh,
the
absolutely,
radio.
yes. Yeah, we would reach immediately, well, not me, but the radio command staff would immediately reach out to a contractor and work on the patches or how to fix it, whatever problems we have.
Are there any places in the city of Philadelphia where Philadelphia police are on regular patrol in the park at all?
Each district each police district is responsible for its portion of the park that falls within their geographical boundaries. So I'm aware that, yes, the captains in these districts do in fact provide motorcycle, dirt bike patrols, as well as the bicycle patrols will be mixed in as a part of their overall prevention and crime-fighting strategies, yes.
Because the very known fact that police officers are in the park at any given time, just showing the flag by going
Yes.
through, I think sometimes stifles and inhibits crime.
And I don't know if it's good or bad, but I've been around long enough to remember this. But when the dirt bike program was initiated, it was initiated due to the fact of the vast park systems that we had and our inability to access a lot of those areas via a car. So that is in fact why the dirt bikes were actually implemented into a lot of districts that border these parks. And we have a pretty robust system.
And is there a protocol in place, for example, if everything does work? Somebody has a problem for example, the scenario I outlined where the fella got hit with a bike and the bicycle just kept going, but say he would have had a cell phone, and if he would have called and said, look, I just got run over, I believe I may have broken my leg, is there sort of a protocol for someone to be able to find that person?
The 911, the issue is, we're trying to identify exactly where he is. I don't think we can't pinpoint his location from police radio.
Right.
But nonetheless, having the mile marker systems in the park and knowing where they came in the park is usually a benefit. So yeah, we'll access them as soon as possible. We have enough officers that can get into the park nowadays to assist and render aid. So that type of concern is not I'm not afraid I can't get into the park.
Okay.
Because the barriers for the other vehicles can't get in. They block us as well.
Well,
So that's
would
why
be
we have
true.
to have alternate methods to get in. The bicycles, we have the motorcycles, we have a lot of other accesses.
I mean, is that kind of reviewed from time to time, that if somebody were, or an incident were to happen at whatever place you wanted to make, that the officers have an understanding of, getting into that park? Because what you just said is absolutely true. It could be
I can
preventative to police as well.
Yeah, I can tell you from experience, I worked right around Pennypack Park, and we knew the access points, so I know how to get in. I knew where I could get in and how far I could get with my car. I'll be honest with you. I've had my police car deeper in the Pennypack Park than I really want to admit right now.
Yeah.
But we've been able to get in there when I've needed to get in there, and the officers that work those areas are intimately aware of what they can do.
So the officers, you think, are trained, because not everyone has that intimate knowledge as you, that growing up in that area.
I will say
Living
they're not officially trained, but when you come to that district, if that's your sector, that's your PSA, you're going to know and learn those access points, because that's critical to your job, because
Correct.
we need to be able to respond there. That will be one of the first things that I know that officers will look to find out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman.
thank you.
Is there a reason you would map connectivity at all? Is that just something you live with, or is it something you know or can map and say, if I go into this section, I'm going to be off my cell phone?
I don't know. I'll be very honest. I don't really know that answer. We
Okay.
do have maps of the park in our police districts, and so the officers are aware of what the structure of the park. But the mile marker system that's been put in by place is actually probably the most important thing, I think, that's been put in the park. Because like I said, people walk in one road, and they'll run 2 miles or 3 miles down, but it winds all over. So that may not be the quickest way to access the park. So you say, I entered from, let's say, Pine Road, but you've already run up to Willits Road. I mean, at that point, you're 4 miles away. The officers need to know a better way to get to you quicker, and they do.
So if I have a cell phone tower that I can connect to, I'm going to push my GPS, push home, and Siri's going to tell me how to get there. I think solutions technologically might be at hand.
I've been in the park. The problem is, when you do that, you'll come up in a big green mass. I mean, on the AT&T
And it won't
maps.
tell you.
But
Okay.
that would be something.
There's no street to turn left on. Got it.
Hey, listen, I think there's an opportunity for someone to come up with a very creative app to figure that out, because there is some very detailed maps of the pathways and the walkways in the park. But when you go on your cell phone, you'll just see a green dot. Your dot will be on an overall green park area and won't say exactly where you're at in the park.
So my final question would be, is there pole electrical outlet infrastructure to support some of the solutions that I believe are going to be proposed?
I suppose it would depend on the exact solution that's determined. There is infrastructure going to a lot of areas. The capacity would have to be determined based on the solution.
And we're going to hear from them next. But I'm wondering, if you have an electrical outlet pole that is feeding a wire or the Cobra lighting system that we have in some parts of the park, is that compatible with what the technology that is being proposed? And I guess we're going to find that out. Do we have any other questions for this panel?
To answer that one question, one thing in other parks that I've seen from around the country, I don't know if they're here personally, but the use of cellular technology, solar technology for lighting and those kind of things, so it avoids having to run those wires and disrupt the ecosystem of the park.
So I'm not a geek. I'm going to listen to the geeks to tell me what the technological solution. Now, I mean, they're cool geeks now. It's not, geeks aren't what they used to be. So, does anybody have any other questions? Seeing none, bring on the geeks. Who's the next panel?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The next panel is Doug Smith, Andrew Peterson, Joseph Divis, and Vilma Sneed.
And a good-looking group of geeks they are. I don't know, Doug, you don't look like a geek. I know you're smart, but you don't quite look the part. Stereotype. You can pull a chair up if you. Thank you guys for your patience, and thank you for listening to the testimony before you in order to give us some options and possibilities. So state your name, pull the mic close to you, and state your name for the record and begin your testimony.
Great. Well, good morning, council members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about cell signal coverage in Fairmount Park. For the record, my name is Doug Smith, Vice President, State Government Affairs for Verizon. And joining me today is Andrew Peterson, a professional engineer and contract employee to Verizon, works in our wireless organization, specifically in Philadelphia. He'll be able to answer any very technical questions that we might get into. But as Councilman Jones, you may recall back in the fall, you and I talked a little bit about the Fairmount Park cell signal issues, and I produced a map. That map displays Verizon's cell coverage in Fairmount Park, and we have a blow-up of that map here today. Now, in Verizon wireless world, when we do a cell signal map, we color code it. And the color code of green is good. And if you will notice, that map is blanketed in green. So we're very pleased with that, and we understand that it satisfies all of the park. We believe it's over 99% coverage of the Verizon cell signals. And to add to that, we are adding yet another tower that should be online in 2018, which will add, as I like to call it, another lane to an already 3-lane superhighway. So we're adding yet another tower again, coming online in 2018. Now, what we did here earlier was a little bit about dead spots. And while the map shows that we have 99% coverage throughout Fairmount Park, clearly there's going to be spots, maybe at the bottom of a gorge next to a 30-foot rock outcropping, where your Verizon signal may drop. There's a two-part solution to that. The first is we need to know where that happens. So when your constituency comes to you, I need your staff to reach to me so we can work to solve that problem. But to solve that problem and to be environmentally sensitive, we have an opportunity to partner with City Council. Right now, the zoning for Fairmount Park prevents wireless facilities from being constructed there. If we're going to find and resolve those dead spots, I need the ability to put small cells somewhere in that park, whether it's light standards or monopoles, to take care of those pockets that I just described. Again, we don't have many in the Verizon network, but where they exist, I need the zoning flexibility. So I need that ordinance to be examined, opened, and revised for Fairmount Park. Be happy to work with my peers, the Friends of Wissahickon, as well as your staff to see if we can get that ordinance revised. Again, we're not talking about 180-foot towers here. We're talking about opportunities for small cells to sit on top of traffic lights, to fill in voids because of the topography. Again, environmentally sensitive would be the goal. We'd work very closely with the Friends of Wissahickon and others, as well as your staffs. So at this time, we don't have any formal remarks beyond that, and I'd be happy to turn it over to my friends in the industry, starting with Joe Divis.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of council. My name is Joe Divis, Assistant Vice President, External Affairs for AT&T. Thanks for having us here today, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss this important issue. One of the things I wanted to do coming into this hearing, and I've taken some pretty copious notes, is to hear from folks that are in the park system all the time, particularly the Wissahickon Valley area. One of the things that we take, as Doug said, one of the important metrics that we use for improving and enhancing our networks is customer input, both anecdotal and formal, along with all the other measurements that our technical people and our engineers do. So this is very helpful, and we actually had a lot of dialogue before the hearing started that I think is throwing some ideas around and making us more sensitive to what some of the experiences are. So that's very important, and we thank you for that. One of the things I wanted to talk about just very briefly is, in addition to the coverage that you talk about, one of the dynamics that we've seen throughout the industry over the last several years is the huge use of the bandwidth of bandwidth and data-intensive activity on our networks. For AT&T alone, since 2007, we've seen a 250,000% increase in data traffic on our network. 250,000% increase. That's only going to go up. Industry folks that study this information say that by 2020, mobile data traffic all across the board is expected to be 6 times the volume of the entire U.S. internet from 2005. So it's just exploding. And a number of those applications, some of them are for, their video streaming, their entertainment, but a lot of mission critical things that are data intensive and data hungry are going through our networks. Firefighters who need building plans when they're going to fight a fire, that's got to go through to their tablets and things like that. Paramedics that are dealing with a sick patient, sending information or getting information from hospitals, that's all data intensive. We talked about drones and the visual capacity of drones. That is data intensive, and those drones generally work off of the mobile network. So we're seeing that is just coming at us like floods. And you see when we have activities on the parkway, like the papal visit, the draft, where you have all of that intense gathering of folks. We got to make sure that we have the coverage.
Boosters.
Excuse me?
You put up boosters in those.
We did. We actually worked collaboratively to put an outdoor distributed antenna system, which I think if you go up and down the park, you would never notice it unless you actually tried to look for it. That was a huge bit of progress that we all made in working together to look at something that really we think benefits the city and benefits the experience of people who are using visiting and even the commerce of the city. One of the things that I did want to mention as well is that in the last 3 years, AT&T has invested $450 million in our networks in the Philadelphia area to address all of the concerns and all of the needs that our customers have, whether it's coverage capacity. And that is a never-ending endeavor, never-ending. So as much progress as we made, we continue to work to look at all of the needs of our customers in the city of Philadelphia, in the surrounding suburban region, and really across the country. So I look forward to continuing this dialogue as we go forward with the stakeholders from the park, with the city, and see what we can do. It's a challenging, it is, as was stated by previous witnesses, very, very challenging topography and terrain, very environmentally sensitive. So there's not, there's some work to do and conversations to have. Thank you very much.
So is your map synonymous, the two maps, by way of connectivity over that parkland?
I haven't seen his map, and I don't think Doug's seen my map. So we are competitors.
Yeah,
We are competitors. So we try not we
no
do.
commingling of maps.
That's why I put my map here so he couldn't see.
I will tell you, though, we do a lot of co-location on our cell sites, where you may see a tower or a building, and you'll see multiple antenna arrays. So that is something we do, but beyond that, we are competitors, and we...
So we'd like to know, connectivity-wise, there's always been a marketing piece that what's the difference in 1%? Well, in the park, what is the percent difference?
Oh, I'd have to go and investigate that. I wouldn't know.
Doug's
The other thing...
Doug's sitting there pretty confident.
Oh, I know he does. Yeah, that's okay.
That's a style thing.
It's also, I think, important as we discuss this, that it is radio, and radio has certain characteristics of how it reacts to huge buildings of granite and how it penetrates, as well as that deep valleys and heavily wooded areas. It's line of sight. That's what the device, the wireless part is, from the device to the antennas. And anytime you have things that can get in the way of that signal, it can inhibit. Capacity at a cell site can also inhibit the signal strength, or can affect whether, in one day you may have 3 bars and the other day you may have 1 bar. There's a lot of different elements to running a network, in addition to the different spectrum bands that we have to utilize that have different propagation characteristics. So it's a very complicated effort that our engineers and technical folks do. We try to make it as seamless as possible, obviously, for our customers, and cover every area that we can with enough bandwidth and capacity to serve those areas. But it's a continuing endeavor. It never ends. And I think the words of Vince Lombardi perhaps are good here. We strive for perfection, and we achieve excellence. That's kind of how we try to do it.
That was a very interesting response. So let me simplify. If I'm with one provider versus another, there may be different receptions, drops, depending on where your infrastructure is located versus his. Correct?
Yes, sir.
You got to turn that mic on. You can turn that mic on. Just push the button. There you go.
Hi, Andrew
sit down.
Peterson. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. I just wanted to say, as an independent radio frequency design engineer, I see the networks from both of these providers, as well as some of the other.
Can you state your name for the record?
Andrew Peterson.
Thank you.
I see the networks of these providers as well as some of the others in the area. And to the point that was just made, even if these providers are on the same exact structures in an area like this, which I'm not saying they are, but even if they were, their antennas would be at different heights. They're operating with slightly different parameters, slightly different equipment, slightly different antennas, etc. So even in a scenario where we have the exact same co-located facilities surrounding, you're going to have different coverage, and then that coverage is affected by a lot of variables. Seasonality, whether the leaves are on the trees or they're off the trees, what type of capacity demand is on the network at any given moment.
So those streamings that are talked about, that 250,000 increase, impacts drops?
Absolutely. Yeah, as capacity demand continues to grow and the networks continue to load as they have, We do what we can with the resources and the technological advancements to keep up, which has accommodated that 250,000% increase over the last decade. But as the network loads, the signal quality degrades. That's just a matter of how the technology works, which actually shrinks coverage footprint.
So I'm gonna dive in here and bear with me on terminology. Is it a question of infrastructure and antenna placement or bandwidth and capacity?
Yes, if we seek to provide service into the park that is, the example was made earlier of someone who is going to sit on a rock and stream Netflix at a low elevation point in the park. If that's the robust data service that we seek to provide, we will have to add resources into the park in terms of whatever those look and feel like, from an environmentally sensitive perspective. But we will have to have additional resources in the park. You can't provide that type of service from an outside-in type of design.
So if I'm two different scenarios. If I'm sitting at a beautiful location and a group of ducks meander down the stream and I want to FaceTime that live, is that a different experience than if I want to call 911?
Absolutely.
And which one is more reliable and which one may fade?
The voice call is going to require a less robust radio channel. So that will have a higher probability of going through regardless of your environment. If we're talking about a FaceTime call versus a typical voice call, a 911 call, that will have a higher probability. Depending on where you are, they may both go through with
So our priority, at least my priority, I'm not speaking for my colleagues, is the voice call.
Right.
Is the emergency access. And those things, I want everybody to experience live streaming and, the environmental projection of what's going on around you. But if you need an ambulance, that is our priority. So one of the things that I'm beginning to hear is that there needs to be a three-sided discussion between our stewards of the park, between our actual commissioners and stewards within government, and the tech people within the industry, to compromise on how much aesthetics, how much environmental are we willing to. So for me, aesthetically, and no disrespect to you guys, I hate those towers, phone towers that are disguised as trees. They're not fooling anyone. They're not fooling the birds, the bees, or me. But if you're talking about smaller towers that might be on top of a light pole, those solutions might be more acceptable to our environmentalists.
That's the conversation that we need to have with the Friends of Wissahickon, your staff, and the city, so that we can get the zoning ordinance addressed.
Councilman Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the newer technology that you have for cell phone operations, I'm curious in reference to, because I've seen some of the smaller, and I think you made reference to the, I don't want to call them a tower, but they're the smaller cell phone operations. Small cells, which can be placed. How many would you need to place within Fairmount Park? I know you haven't done an assessment, but I'm just trying to think of the type of those small cells that could be brought into the park without having a overly negative impact on the aesthetic of the park. How would you balance the two? And it's for anyone on the panel.
I've done some back of the envelope type calculations for that. Best I can figure that the southern portion of the park is about 4,000 acres. The northern, I think I heard earlier testimony that was about 2,000 acres. Each small cell, now this would depend on a lot of factors, so you can't hold me to this number, but under ideal conditions, a small cell can cover about 72 acres. So if we were to blanket the park with that robust data service, if that was the goal, so beyond the voice service that at least from Verizon's perspective is already pretty good, 99% coverage or so. But if the goal was to blanket the park with that robust data service, we would be on the order of 100 nodes. So 100 of those small cells, which is a lot.
That's a lot.
If the goal was, let's just fill in some of those dead spots, then that's a completely different conversation. And I don't know that that was the question.
Yeah, that gives me a little perspective because, I mean, 100
It's a lot.
that's a lot.
It's a lot of infrastructure.
And I'm also curious, in other parks I'm thinking of, I'm in DC a lot, like Rock Creek Park or other parks around the country, what other type of telecommunication infrastructure have been used to provide coverage in other parks that are heavily used by pedestrians where you don't have, well, not just pedestrians, but people walking, entertaining, and you don't have cell coverage? Is that something you may know or people on the panel may know?
I think the other thing to throw into this conversation is the infrastructure that is needed to support any new cell sites.
Yeah.
You need electric, you need backhaul. You know, once the whatever, whether it's the voice call or the data goes from your handset to the cell site, it then has to get transmitted to wherever it's going to go. So you need a lot of infrastructure along with the radios and the antennas that go with all that. So I think in the it's easy to kind of say in the abstract you do this or that, but then it gets real complicated as to how you then engineer something like that, as well as then working with all the other wireless providers and where their signal is and how you. So it's a very complicated, I think, endeavor, and I think at least from my standpoint, today we're kind of starting the conversation and with the stakeholders and with the industry, because it's a complex problem because the area is so challenging, and it's going to take, I think, a lot of creativity that's going to have to adapt to the realities of the network as well as the sensitivities of the area.
But yeah, because I understand that, but I'm curious from what's been experienced in other parks. Are there any other comparable locations where cell towers were used to provide coverage?
So if I can chime in, my name is Vilma Sneed. I'm actually a
Can you pull
government
that-
relations. Sure.
There you go.
My name is Vilma Sneed. I'm a government relations manager for mobility. And actually, unlike my panel colleagues here, our company is not a wireless carrier. We actually provide the wireless infrastructure across the United States. So we work with all the major carriers to deploy their networks. We do DAS systems, we do Wi-Fi, and most recently, we work actually with Sprint, who's one of our partners, installing small cells and transport networks across the United States. So the challenging thing that we have seen that Mr. Smith has already pointed out is some zoning issues. So even in areas where we would want to deploy infrastructure, we run into zoning concerns from the municipalities that frankly prevents us from installing our infrastructure. And here in Philadelphia, we actually do work with the city. We work with the streets department, deploying small cell network for Sprint. And we work with PICO to actually attach small cells to PICO structures and to city-owned structures. So that is something that we would propose to the city for the park, would be to install small cells. But as my colleagues have mentioned, there are some concerns about getting power to the site or locating it in this type of environment. And one of the big concerns, as you mentioned, Councilman, as far as putting it in other parks, a lot of parks across the country don't allow us to install infrastructure. And that's just because they have kind of antiquated zoning regulations that pretty much do not allow wireless infrastructure in those parks. So that's something that if you guys would be willing to work with the carriers and with us, obviously we can remedy that situation and install infrastructure in the park where possible.
Yeah, I guess the concern is, I mean, if you did legislation to rezone, that could possibly open things up in a broader perspective going forward. Although I'm, as a person who's done zoning for a number of years as an attorney, I'm not a fan of doing variances, but this seems like it's something that's more aligned to a variance where you're just allowing a smaller use without changing the zoning of part of the park, which could possibly open things up in a much broader perspective. I think when I think of, like, for example, the park, and specifically I'm thinking of parking lot at Bells Mills Road, Valley Green, other locations where you could have a small, like, cell towers in areas that are not going to be as disruptive to the park. It probably want to give you full coverage, but if you think of that location, Valley Green, the former, I guess that was when that was the police department had that property, used to be District 92, that location, which, I mean, there's ways you could provide additional coverage without impacting the beauty and antiquity of the park.
And absolutely, and I think some of the concerns that we have seen from the local governments across the country is, of course, aesthetics, and we're very aware of that, and I provided Councilman with a presentation with kind of an example of small sets that we have deployed across the country. So they can be attached to light poles, they can be attached to new poles that are kind of blended with the environment, that are painted. The equipment can be painted. There's shrouding options. So as far as the aesthetical concerns of the park, and we've heard some other panel members discuss their concerns about that, I'm sure all the carriers and infrastructure providers, that is something that can be worked on.
Yeah. And I'll just make one last point. I mean, I think that the balance is, how do you balance the majesty of the park? I mean, when I run in Valley Green, which I do somewhat regularly, I like the fact that I can't be reached by a cell phone. But for, I mean, I remember.
Is that why
No, I remember, I mean, when my son is 16, so I remember when he was very young, my wife and I would walk there on Saturday mornings or like Sundays after church with my son and my dog, and we couldn't get in coverage. And that was, it was basically our oasis getting, and that's one of the benefits of the park. It's a kind of an oasis within the city, away from all of the technology and life. But at the same point, if I was running, and I've had friends who've had, a heart condition, or you have a heart attack or something like that, and if you're doing it at a time, like say early in the morning, I tend to run at like 4:45 in the morning, and if someone's not there, or from a public safety perspective for both men and women, if they're running late at night, especially in the summertime when it's warmer at night, that provides other concerns. So the ultimate question is, how do we balance between the aesthetics of the park and also public safety for citizens in the city?
Thank you, Councilman. So I think a couple of things we've gathered, that there's a willingness to figure this out. I mean, I think that's very important. I think we have the stakeholders to figure it out, the city representatives, the friends of the park, and the technical providers, that we can create a balance that allows for environmentally sensitive technology to cover the dead zones without taking away from the aesthetics. I think also that, and I guess this is a technical question, do you guys kind of share some of the infrastructure as well? So if you own a pole and you own the technology, you'll work it out in some type of easement or cooperative agreement on providing that service. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you're working together already?
Yes.
So this is not an uncommon concept. So what I'd like to do, if it pleases the members of this committee, is to give us, I'm gonna say 6 months to figure it all out. Maybe not that long. Let's go with September to figure it out and reconvene to see what creative solutions you guys have come up with. I will say that we have one other area where this type of public safety and technology merge is with the kiosks. Superman can no longer change in a phone booth because there are no phone booths. But what New York has done, and that's a subject for another hearing, is created these kiosks for charging, for data use, and for emergency calls, similar to the ones that you see near hospitals and or college campuses that are provided for the convenience of the students and protection of the staff and students. So what I'd like to do is give you some time to figure this out. I like your green map, but there are different shades of green that we can probably get a little more out of. And then convene with our colleagues to see how that works, particularly in areas, not just in Valley Green, but in Pennypack, in Cobbs Creek, in other areas. Where? Yeah, so that we get a bigger picture view. Also, in light of what we might provide for solutions by way of emergency calls that don't bump into Delaware County or White Marsh, and if there is a tweaking that can happen with that to give us added safety protections.
Yeah, just Councilman on that, we continue to tweak the network on that, and sometimes, I think it was discussed earlier, when you're at the border like that of the municipalities, the radio waves don't understand Montgomery County, Delaware County, Philadelphia County, and if the cell site that you're closest to, for whatever reason, is in the other county, that's where the phone looks for the strongest signal. If a cell is at capacity and the call needs to get completed, it may bounce to some other one. So I think we all as carriers continue to work and make sure that the sectors are directed and the translations are done in a way that if a call is made from Philadelphia, it's going to go to Philadelphia, Delaware County, but vice versa. But you just do have those instances, and I think that's just the nature of radio and how radio will act in finding the strongest signal, or when a cell site is at capacity and it has to bounce to another to make sure the call gets completed, because that's essentially the most important thing. Make sure that call gets to somebody who can then act on it.
So we agree that the perfect should not be the enemy of the good, but we can always strive to get better.
Absolutely.
And so we want to be able to say, can you hear me now? And by doing that, safeguard our citizens and provide a better service to your customers. So if there are no other questions, Councilman.
Well, and not questions, but closing comments. And Mr. Chairman, I agree with you, and I think there should be a follow-up maybe sometime in September or so, and maybe even the committee can write a letter to you with our concerns, just to memorialize what we just talked about, because I thought we had a very good meeting here, a very good hearing. We got ideas and thoughts that are actually new to me, and I'm a park user. And I would have to agree with my colleague, Councilman Green, that sometimes it's great not to have that cell phone ringing, but I would like to have that option of the person turning their cell phone off, that when they really needed it, that cell phone was really there for their use. I mean, there's a lot of power here. The computer power in these phones is more than all the computers that sent John Glenn into space. Just one of these. That's amazing. So here I got two phones and I got double. So I think the ability to use them are very, very important in our day, and particularly as we go forward. And I'm going to take up Ms. Saffer on that tour. And it's kind of interesting, gentlemen. I have a Verizon phone and I have an AT&T phone. And I'll do my own little study. I might even be calling you. I'm going to be calling somebody to see if the system really works, because our lives really truly depend on it. And as human beings, I think the ability to use the park in safety in an urban setting is very, very important. We in Philadelphia really, with our park system, have a unique gift that no other major city has. I mean, we have areas that For example, Ms. Soffer said at Alpine Gorge. Well, heck, otherwise you want to get to Alpine Gorge, you got to go to Colorado or to the Swiss Alps. Here we can go to Wissahickon. I think it's a great thing for Philadelphians to be able to use their park system in safety. And one last thing, I didn't realize, and I think Mr. Peterson said that sometimes leaves affect the transmission. These are things I did not know, and we need to know about that. But the overall goal is safety. So when someone walks in that park, they know that if they need help, they can just dial it, and someone will respond. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, panel.
Councilman Green, is that it? This committee will now stand at recess to the call of the chair. Our estimated time will be September to try to get these stakeholders together to come up with some practical, aesthetically pleasing solutions to our public safety concerns. Thank you all.